In the drylands of West Africa, rural communities are highly dependent on the wide range of trees found in the savanna landscape. Women in particular are the main beneficiaries of non-timber forest products derived from species like the shea, the nere, the tamarind or the baobab. Throughout history, these products have been critically important for household consumption and for providing key sources of cash income. In this part of the world, the impact of land degradation, climate change, and diminishing tree cover has dramatically increased women's vulnerability. To make matters worse, existing social-cultural norms are often restrictive and they offer limited opportunities for women to participate in and benefit from landscape restoration or agroforestry initiatives. Gender inequity continues to be one of the most significant barriers to making livelihood and landscape more productive and resilient in the region, and social innovation are urgently needed. To challenge restrictive social norms and redress gender inequities, we must first understand how gender dynamics around natural resource management manifest in different environments. To do so, ICRAF scientists developed an innovative participatory approach that combined gender analysis tools with system thinking, which they applied in 6 communities in south-central Burkina Faso and northern Ghana. The results showed that while women were involved in all farm and livestock activities, they depended heavily on trees, especially shea nuts. Non-timber forest products made up significant proportion of the total household income in both countries, especially among the poorest households. This income comes almost exclusively from women, but in Burkina Faso they often have no control over how it is spent. In both countries, existing norms and legal rights around land and tree ownership also further disadvantage women, excluding them from participating meaningfully in decision-making. The team then organized community workshops to feedback the evidence from the research finding and facilitate a structured dialogue around gender relations to explore how local norms were generating constraints not only for women but the whole household and what could be done to improve the situation. One of the first activities of the workshop was to introduce the concept of gender and the difference between sex and gender. The former relates to the biological differences between men and women, and the latter refers to the socially constructed relations and roles associated with gender. Grasping this distinction is important in order to recognize that gender roles are socially determined. They vary from one culture to another and have evolved over time. If norms have evolved over time, they are not unchangeable. They can be transformed. One of the critical gender gaps relates to the division of labor within the household and the imbalances of the workload between women and men. In another exercise, participants were given photographs illustrating various household and farm duties. They then grouped the photographs on a large sheet of paper according to who usually performs the tasks in 5 categories: exclusively male, predominantly male, predominantly female, or exclusively female, or equally shared. The placements of the photos reveal that women have far more domestic responsibilities than men. Participants agreed that tasks could be better balanced between men and women, and that some of the daily domestic activities, such as washing up and cooking, for example, could readily be shared by men. The last part of the workshop included role plays in which men and women assumed the role of the opposite sex to engage in scenarios of negotiations around certain restrictive norms. These included challenging norms around assessing land and trees, decision-making power for tree planting, or how income is spent, as well as the division of labor within the household. The workshop opened a structured yet fun space for the community to discuss how gender norms and roles, which usually go unquestioned, may be limiting people from making the best use of the resources they have available. The dialogue and the visual evidence helped them realize how changes could be made to improve their well-being and resilience. If efforts to restore degraded landscape and increase resilience in the Sahelian countries are to be successful, they must explicitly address social norms that currently restrict women's participation in decision-making and undervalue women's roles in their livelihood systems. Tackling harmful gender stereotypes and gaps cannot be considered as an accessory to technical intervention, but a critical requirement to achieve sustainable development goals. To achieve this at scale, adequate human and financial resources must be allocated to embed meaningful gender action research in development projects. This will help challenge the structural and normative barriers that underpin gender inequalities and trigger the necessary transformative processes to promote social equity.